Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modco podcast. My name is Angel, and thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited to have you all here. I'm super excited to be doing my first episode of my podcast. So, thank you all so much for joining and just taking the time to check me out. I am greatly appreciative of it. And let's get started. So, I do just want to say before we get started, I just want to put this disclaimer out here. The Modco podcast is not financial coaching, it's not business coaching, it's not legal advice, it's not medical advice, it's not mental health. I am none of those. I am not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a coach, any of that. I am just a person who loves organizing. I do have my own organizing business. I'm just a person who loves organizing, who loves planning events, and I just want to provide different tips and tricks that I use in order to get organized, to stay organized, and to plan events. So, just letting you all know that this is not any type of coaching or anything like that. This is just information, and you are free to take this information and use it as you wish or as you do not wish. But I do not have the credentials to provide any type of financial, legal, medical, therapeutic, therapist, anything like that. So I just want to get that out there before we get started. So, again, thank you all so much for joining, and let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. So, with this being the first episode, I just want to introduce myself to you all so you can know who you're listening to and what the purpose of this podcast is and why you're listening to it. So, as I said, my name is Angel. I am a virtual assistant. I am the owner of the Modest Company, and the podcast name is a play off of my business name. So, the Modest Company, the Modco. Um, I have I started this business about a year ago almost. It was under a different name, and in December of 2022, I changed the name to The Modest Company, and I absolutely love it. So I have been just in the administrative field, being an administrative assistant for over 10 years, and I have over 10 years of customer service experience as well. I also hold a master's in public relations, and I have an event planning certification. And I just love to organize. Like, it's organizing makes me happy. Organizing is my happy place. It's just, I find it to be calming and relaxing. People are always kind of like, seriously, why do you take so much pleasure out of organizing? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if you need your house organized, like, invite me over and just happen to mention that you need to start organizing and pour me a cup of coffee, and your house may or may not be organized by the time I leave. I'm just saying, I can't help it. I enjoy it. I do try to restrain myself when I go someplace and I see something that's unorganized. I try to stop myself from just jumping in and organizing, but it makes me happy. Um, so, so a little bit more about me. I have been married for 10 and a half years, and we have a 7.5-year-old son, and we currently reside in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm addicted to caffeine. I absolutely love my coffee. I will drink it multiple times a day. I don't care if it's 7 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night. If I want a cup of coffee, I'm going to go for it. If you would like to if you like to make me happy, other than having me organize something, you can probably bring me a cup of coffee and we'll be good friends. So that's just a little bit about me. And over more episodes, you'll get to know more about me. You'll get to know more about my family and things that I love and things that I don't love. About my business, the Modest Company. So, as I said, started it about a year ago almost. And the purpose of the Modest Company is to let female entrepreneurs know that they don't have to do it all and that someone has their back. So, I offer services such as business organization, email management, template creation, public relations, and marketing services. And I just provide the path for female entrepreneurs to focus on what they love doing the most while someone else is focusing on the tasks that they don't necessarily enjoy, but the tasks that keep their business running, because I believe that we're better together. And if you're having to spend all of your time focusing on a task that you don't like, or that you're not necessarily good at, or that's not in your wheelhouse, that's going to take away from you being able to focus on the tasks that you do like and that are in your wheelhouse. And that can lead to frustration, that can lead to procrastination, that can lead to you wanting to give up. And that's not why, we started a business, was to give up and throw in the towel. So I just want female entrepreneurs to know that someone has their back and that they don't have to do it all. And I know that a lot of times as a woman, it can be extremely hard to ask for help, to come to someone and be like, hey, I really need help with this. But that's why I created the Modest Company. I wanted a comfortable, judgment free place where women can come and say, hey, I need help with this. Hey, I'm struggling with getting this aspect of my business organized, or I'm struggling with this aspect. I know a little bit about it, but I don't know a lot about it. So that's what the Modest Company is for, is to offer support for female entrepreneurs in the areas that they need support in to help their business keep going. So that's a little bit about my company. The reason that I started this podcast, wow. So when I was growing up, I used to love to watch the Oprah Winfrey Show with my mom, and my favorite part was when she got ready to go to commercial and she'd say, "Be back in a moment." I just absolutely love that part, and I fell in love with the show, and I always wanted to have my own talk show. I remember telling my parents growing up, I was like, "I'm gonna be a talk show host just like Oprah. I'm gonna have my own talk show just like Oprah." Um, Majored in communications in college, and people were like, "Oh, you want to be on the news and stuff?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to be on the news." It's like, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" And it's kind of like, I don't know. At that point, I had kind of gotten away from the whole talk show thing, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do with it. And then podcasting became really, really popular a few years ago, and I started listening to podcasts, and I was like, hey, this is really neat, this is cool. And it just brought me back to the times when I was younger and I wanted to have my own talk show. And I was like, well, you don't have to necessarily be discovered to have a podcast. Anyone can start a podcast. So starting a podcast has been something that has been heavily on my mind for, I will say, probably at least maybe the last 4 or 5 years at least. And I just never did it. And finally, I decided, hey, a podcast would tie in perfectly with my business, because my business is about organizing, it's about planning events. I can start a podcast as well, giving different tips and tricks on that. So that's why I started the podcast. I started as a way to just be out there and to give people different tips and different tricks on their business. I actually got the idea for it from my Instagram page, because I was posting on Instagram, and sometimes I'm like, I just get so frustrated with social media. You gotta do this and you gotta tag that and you gotta hashtag this, and then you gotta make sure that you post it at the exact right time, like not a minute before, not a minute after. And it's like, well, are people actually paying attention to it? And then I just realized, I thought about it, I was like, well, a podcast, if you do a podcast, the people that are listening to it are people that want to listen to it. They didn't just happen to see this post on their news feed and they're going to scroll by it. They actually took the time to either search for your podcast or follow the link for your podcast and click on it and sit here and listen to it. So it was like, this is it. This is what I'm starting my podcast about, the thing that excites me and that makes me happy. And I just want to be able to share that with the world, or those of you who want to listen. So yeah, so that's why I started the podcast. The purpose of the podcast, which I've kind of mentioned a couple of times, is to help people get organized. So my business, the Modest Company, is about business organization, but a lot of the tips that I provide can also be used for your personal life to help you get your personal lives organized. You can kind of tweak it for your personal life if you don't have a business, or if your business is organized but you're like, hey, my personal life could use a little bit of organization. You can definitely tweak my tips to make them work either way, for your business, for your personal, or for both of them. And also, I love planning events. I love planning events on a budget. So I will events. Also, as well as tips on how to manage your email so you're not looking down and seeing 8,000 emails. Tips on, I'll also be talking about being an entrepreneur and things that I wish I knew before I became an entrepreneur, things that I'm still learning about while being an entrepreneur, some of my frustrations of it, some of my joys of it, just the life of an entrepreneur, and anything else that may pop into my mind. But well, I shouldn't say anything else, because the main focus of the podcast is organizing tips, event planning tips, and just me talking about being an entrepreneur. There may be times that I have a guest on here that can maybe speak a little bit more to a subject that I'm talking about. But for the most part, it'll just be me. I'll be your host. You'll get to listen to me. The podcast will be a weekly podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. And again, I'm just so grateful for those of you that are out there. This is, I think this is going to be great. I'm really excited for it, and I'm really looking forward to it. So before we go, I do want to give you my first organizing tip. So my first organizing tip that I would like to give you is to make a to-do list. I love a good to-do list. Sometimes I get a little fancy and I color code them, but it just all depends on what you want and how you want to do it. So if you already make a to-do list, great, wonderful. Keep it up. Like, that's awesome. If you don't already make to-do list, no worries. Let's get started today. Go ahead and pull out a pen and a piece of paper and make a list of the stuff that you need to do, that you need to check off. And if a to-do list feels overwhelming for you, if that's why you've never done one because you've just always felt overwhelmed by doing it, or you don't know how to get started, you don't have to make a to-do list for the entire week. You can just make a to-do list for what you need to do tomorrow. So get your pen and your piece of paper, write it down. This is what I need to do for tomorrow. If that still feels too overwhelming, no worries. We can start even smaller. Get that pen and piece of paper and just write down what you need to do tomorrow morning. Anything that happens from the time you wake up until noon, write that down, or write down the 3 most important things that you need to get to tomorrow. It's just as simple as that. So just get started. Like, that's the main thing. Get started, and then we can build on it from there. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you all next week. And you can find me on IG at the Modco SC. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share with a friend who may need a little bit of organizing in their life.